This is something that happened back when I was in high school. During that time, I lived at home with my parents and brother. We also had 2 dogs. Usually, just about every day, the dogs would be walked. It would either be me, my brother, or my parents walking them. One night, it was probably like 8 p.m. and the sun was setting. The weather was pretty nice though, and the dogs needed to go for their walk. My parents decided to take them, and my brother was at his friend's house. I was having a hard time with my homework, so I stayed home alone when they left. When my parents walked the dogs, I never really quite knew how long it would be. Our neighborhood was pretty quiet, but it was also pretty large. There were lots of streets and houses in the general area, and there was also a park not that far away. Sometimes it would be like 20 to 30 minutes for the walk, and other times it would be over an hour. I was up in my bedroom when my parents told me they were leaving, and I said bye from up in my bedroom and then heard them walk out. After that, I tried hard to focus on my homework. It was some math assignment, and I just couldn't seem to understand it. I was trying my best to figure it out though, and I lost track of time. The next thing I knew, I heard the front door downstairs opening. I automatically assumed that it was my parents getting back, and I remained focused on what I was doing. But several moments later, I realized that that wasn't right. If my parents were home, I would have heard the dogs with them. The only thing that I had heard when the door opened was somebody walking inside. I never heard my parents' voices or the dogs or anything. I stopped doing my homework. Then I stood up and walked to the doorway. I listened closely to who was inside of our house. I heard nothing but silence. Now I didn't know what was going on. Clearly, it wasn't either of my parents, and I knew that it wasn't my brother either. I thought about going downstairs to look around, but for some reason, I just felt like that was a really bad idea. Instead, I quietly shut my door and went back inside of my room. I couldn't really focus anymore on schoolwork. I was replaying in my head, hearing the door open and close, and wondering if I had imagined the whole thing. Looking back, I was starting to question myself. Then, out of nowhere, I heard the sound of somebody walking up the stairs. The footsteps reached the top, and then started to approach my bedroom. I began to panic, and was really scared that whoever it was would go into my room. I did not have a lock on my door, so they would be able to just walk right in if they wanted. When the footsteps reached my room, they walked right past. Whoever it was going to the end of the hallway. Back there was a bathroom and my parents' bedroom, as well as the guest bedroom. My brother's was right across the hall. I heard whoever it was reach near where my parents' bedroom and the guest bedroom were, and without even giving it much thought, I ran to my doorway, opened it, and sprinted for the stairs. I didn't look at all to see who was actually inside of the house. I felt like this was my best opportunity to get away. When I had raced down the stairs, I ran directly for the front door. I then went outside and started running for the street. I couldn't tell you if whoever was in the house with me went after me or not. My memory of it all is just a blur. When I got back out to the street, I just started jogging until I saw my parents with the dogs. They saw me running and wanted to know what was up. I told them that somebody went inside the house. My dad called the police, and we waited a distance away until they arrived. My parents had left the door unlocked after leaving. Our neighborhood was not known to have crime really, so this was a big deal. The police got there, and only then did we return to our house. When we got back, whoever had been inside the house was now gone. They didn't even steal anything. After that experience, we always locked our doors. In the weeks that followed, there were 2 reports of burglaries just a few blocks away. I think that it was probably the same person. I know a guy was caught in connection with them, but I really don't know if he was the same person who went inside our house or not. I don't really know if there's a way to prove it either. I'm just glad I got out of there when I did. There was no way I was going to stay in the house with the guy just down the hallway from me. That was one of the scariest moments of my life. A strange thing happened to me a couple of years ago. At the time, I lived in an apartment by myself. It was a 1-bedroom, 1-bathroom place, and I lived on the 2nd floor of the building. Overall, the apartment was not the nicest, and it didn't have that many units in it either. I knew a few of my neighbors, but not all of them. One night, I was at home by myself, like usual. It was sometime at night, I really don't know exactly the time, but there was a knock on my door. I walked over and answered it, without giving it that much thought. A man was standing there. He was kind of short and had dark brown hair. The man told me that he was my neighbor from down the hallway, and he pointed a ways to the left. He asked me if he could come inside of my apartment to make a phone call. He said that his Wi-Fi was not working, and he didn't have any service on his phone at the time, so without the Wi-Fi, he couldn't make any calls. I was not comfortable with this. I told the man sorry but no. He said that he would be really fast, and I told him that I really couldn't help him. He kind of came across as a little bit sketchy to me for some reason. The man turned to walk away, and I closed my door. I was really curious afterwards. I had never seen the man before, and had seen most of the people who lived in the building because it wasn't all that big. I thought maybe the guy would knock on another person's door, and I quietly opened my door and looked around the corner to see him walking away. He walked all the way to the end of the hall, and then he went inside of the elevator. I was suspicious that he didn't even live here. At one point or another, I had seen just about everyone that lived on my floor. After the man left, I went to one of the windows in my place. I looked out of it and to the guest parking lot where the main doors open up to. Now, there are assigned parking spaces for all the residents, and those are under the building. There's a small guest parking lot with like 10 spaces out front. I saw the man leave the building and then walk to an older looking car in the guest parking lot and drive away. He definitely didn't live here. So why would he lie to me and claim that he did? I didn't know, but the fact that he wanted me to let him inside of my apartment kind of creeps me out. He certainly made up the whole story about his Wi-Fi being down and him not having any cell phone service. I'm not sure how he got into the building in the first place, but most likely somebody else let him in when they were entering. After that night, I never saw him again. That pretty much confirmed to me that he didn't live there. I'm really glad that I didn't let him inside of my apartment. This happened to me when I was 15 years old. I'm an only child, and I lived at home with my parents at this time. I was in high school, and this was a Friday night. My parents went out with some friends, and I had nothing going on. They told me that they would be out until somewhat later, and my parents got some food for me before they left. I had stayed home quite a few times before by myself, and I didn't mind it at all. It wasn't something that happened every week, but I was very much used to it by that age. So when my parents left, I just had dinner and then finished up my homework for the weekend. Then I went up to my bedroom and started playing video games. I was gaming for probably an hour or two before I heard something downstairs. It was the sound of glass breaking. At first, I thought maybe a plate or something fell from the cabinet, but it didn't really sound like that. I think I was kind of in denial that it was possible somebody could have broken in. I always thought my neighborhood was so safe and nothing ever happened. After a few seconds though, I realized that it was a possibility, especially after I heard footsteps inside. I could barely hear them because they were far away, but I heard just enough. Whoever was inside was in the kitchen area, and I was on the second floor in my bedroom. Then I ran to my door and locked it, and then grabbed my phone. I dialed 911, and the operator answered. I told her somebody had broken into my house. I then gave her the address, and I was told that the police would be there shortly. She said that she would stay on the line with me until they got there. Now, I was talking as quietly as I could and hiding in the back corner of my bedroom. I was underneath my desk and covered myself with a blanket as well. The woman on the other end of the phone asked me if I knew where within the house the intruder was. I tried to listen to hear for the footsteps again. I didn't hear anything though. I honestly had no clue as to where the person was. They could have even left for all I knew. For the next several minutes, I heard nothing. I started to feel better and was told that the police were very close by. But then, out of nowhere, I heard noises in the upstairs hallway. It sounded like whoever was in the house had just reached the top of the stairs. The footsteps walked to just outside of my door, and then they stopped. It was like they knew I was in there. My heart was racing, and then whoever it was tried opening the door. I'm really glad that my door had a lock on it. That's when the woman said the police were arriving. I very faintly heard the sounds of cars pulling into the driveway. At that point, the footsteps upstairs quickly walked away. Then they went back down the stairs. I stayed where I was though. The police entered the house and actually caught the guy as he tried to leave out the back. It was a bit of a scene, and a bunch more police vehicles arrived. My parents were called, and they came home as soon as they found out about it. The man that had broken in I had never seen before. He was sort of younger looking, tall and thin, and longer dark brown hair. I'm not sure what his intentions were or why he chose our house. The police really got there in the nick of time, though. Sometimes I still can't believe that it happened. I will always feel lucky that it turned out as well as it did. For a little bit of background, I live alone, in a 2-bedroom house in a usually quiet neighborhood. One night I was home by myself, and it was pretty late. In fact, I was just about to go to bed and starting to get really tired. That's when there was a knock at my front door. My first reaction was wondering who on earth would be at my door at this hour. But even aside from that, people rarely came knocking on my door. So because of this, I was kind of on edge. I walked to the living room, which was at the front end of the house. All of my windows were covered, including the window to the front door. When I got to the front door, I pulled back the curtain and looked. I didn't see anybody though. Then I carefully opened the front door and looked outside. Nobody was there. I walked out and looked all around, but whoever had knocked was gone. I did notice something on the ground though. On the front step, there was an envelope. I picked it up and took it inside. Once I was in, I opened it up. The envelope did not have anything written on it, but inside was a piece of paper folded up, and on that was writing. I read what was a very cryptic looking note. The letter mentioned me by name in the beginning and was very creepy. Basically, whoever wrote it was just saying that they knew who I was and where I lived, and I better be aware of my surroundings. They didn't directly threaten me or anything, but the letter was also not very well written at all. That's what I gathered from it, but I honestly had no clue what it meant. The handwriting was really sloppy as well, and I couldn't make out some of the words. After reading it, I threw it away, really creeped out. I looked back out of all the windows, but didn't see anyone. It just seemed like a typical, quiet night. I wanted to go to bed, but now I wasn't that tired anymore. I went into my bedroom and put something on the TV to try to relax. I would say about 3 minutes later, I was starting to, but that's when I heard knocking again. It wasn't coming from the front door this time, but the back. Immediately, I got my phone and called the police. I told them what was happening and what had already happened. I was told that someone would be there shortly. After that, I got up and walked over to a window that looked out to the backyard. When I did, I couldn't see anybody. The police got there relatively fast. Whoever had knocked was gone though. The police searched my property and asked me a few questions. After that, they just told me to call again if anything else happened. There wasn't a whole lot that could be done. Aside from showing them the letter, I had never seen the person, so I couldn't give any kind of a description. After the police left, I was able to fall asleep, although it took a while. Since that night, there was no more strange events or knocks on my door. I still wonder who did that and why. The letter was very strange. It may have all been some dumb prank or something just to try to scare me. I really don't know anyone who would do that or why though. I'm just glad that nothing like that has happened since. This story happened a long time ago, when I was 10. I don't remember all the details, but I know that on this night, I was left home alone. I was not left alone all that much as a child at that age. It had to be one of the first times, but I believe that I had been left alone a few times prior. My parents usually wouldn't leave me home alone for more than a few hours at most. I'm an only child, and we lived in a 2-story house with all of the bedrooms being upstairs. So at this time, I believe it was the late afternoon or the early evening. I was inside of my bedroom, and my parents had been gone for a while. I just remember that I heard a knock on the front door. We occasionally had people knocking on the door, and usually it was just somebody trying to sell us stuff or whatever. When I got downstairs and into the kitchen, I looked at the front door. I remember seeing a man standing there, and we made eye contact for a second. He was looking at me through the window, and the guy was wearing a black jacket and jeans, and he seemed pretty average looking. I walked over to the door and answered it. I was curious as to who he was, and I didn't think anything could go wrong. I'm sure that at some point my parents had told me not to talk to people I don't know or answer the door for them. I really can't remember it though, and I guess I just didn't know any better. The man said hi to me and asked me if my parents were home. I told him no, and the man then asked to come inside. I remember asking him why, and he said that his car broke down and he needed to make a phone call. I believed him, and I said that he could come in to use the phone. When I opened up the door, he walked in and into the kitchen. Our phone was hanging on the wall in the kitchen, and I pointed it out to him. Although I remember when he entered the house, I had a bad feeling about it. I'm not really sure why I did at the time, but I just did. The man picked up the phone and started to dial a number. I stood there inside the kitchen with him about 10 feet away. The next thing I remember is the guy messing around with the phone and then saying that nobody was answering. He then hung up the phone but did not leave. I expected him to make the call and leave, and if nobody answered it, then too bad. But he kept standing there in the kitchen. Then I remember he started to walk out of the kitchen towards the living room in the back of the house. I was wondering where he was going. And then, right as he was walking into the other room, I heard my parents pulling into the driveway. When they did, the man suddenly turned and started running. He sprinted past me and ran for the front door. He then opened it up and bolted out the door into our yard. After sprinting through our yard, he cut through the neighbor's front yard and then went onto the street. After that, he went out of sight. Our driveway was at the opposite side of the house that he ran. My parents parked their car and soon got out and walked up to me, asking me what was going on. They said they saw a guy running through the yard and asked me if I was okay and what had happened. I told them the story, and they said that I never should have let the man inside. I learned a valuable lesson that day. At that age, I should have known better, but I didn't. I feel really lucky that my parents got home when they did. I'm not sure if that man was planning to rob our house or what. Luckily, I never saw him again after that.